We start with George watching an action movie and freaking out because the main character is in danger. Seriously, George? You're Nancy Drew's friend. Your life is constantly in danger.
Argo Funk Book Review. Argo Funk Book Review.
Nancy and George are in Wyoming on a wilderness trip. The leader is Coach Pemberton. He's mean to our heroes and openly favors the kids from his school. Football players Johnny and Kurt, and cheerleaders Melissa and Stacia, who really shouldn't be here because they care more about their fingernail polish than wilderness survival. Also on the trip are two brothers named Dan and Pete Shimoya, but don't bother remembering them. They almost never talk, and they only exist so we can have a logistics problem towards the end of the book. Someone sets a fire in Nancy's bedroom, and Nancy gets suspicious when Johnny moves a giant rock that weighs hundreds of pounds. Sure enough, she discovers the rock was propped up so it could be easily moved. I don't know how this trick was set up, because we're talking about perfectly balancing a rock that's hundreds of pounds. That's a Sisyphean task. The cheerleaders are selfish, and Johnny almost dies when his carabiner breaks during a Tyrolean traverse. Nancy saves him with the belay line, and I will be honest, I had no idea what any of those things are. So I had to find a picture to figure out what was going on during this scene. The Hardy Boys arrive. Nancy explains she called them earlier when no one was looking. Today's Nancy-Frank shipping fuel is the fact that Nancy and Frank are so similar-minded, they finish each other's sentences. The Hardys agree to secretly follow the campers for a while until the plot needs them. Someone sets Johnny's sleeping bag on fire. Coach explains Johnny was a star quarterback who lost his nerve after someone was injured. Coach set up this camping trip and the fake rock to boost Johnny's self-esteem. Johnny's worried he's a jinx. He tries to drop out of the trip. George gets indignant on his behalf. He stares at her and says, "She has really nice eyes." Focus, Johnny. This is not the time for flirting. Actually, I checked. The word eyes appears over 100 times in this book. The author really likes eyes. Johnny decides to keep going for the sake of George's really nice brown eyes. Kurt and Johnny get into a fight because Kurt thinks Johnny is a girlfriend stealer. Ooh, better look out, George. Melissa is the girlfriend in question. She could explain what happened, but she doesn't because she'd rather have two hot guys fight over her. Nancy discovers Coach has a serious gambling problem. As in, Coach was supposed to bring an emergency radio. Instead, he brought a one-way gambling radio so he could keep up with his gambling sports scores. I don't know why he couldn't have kept up with sports scores on a normal radio, but now our heroes can't call for help if something bad happens. Surprise! Something bad happens! The Hardys almost die in a mudslide, and they witness a plane crash. They save the delirious pilot, who tries to escape from them multiple times. A bunch of mobsters with shotguns show up to capture the pilot. The Hardys know they're mobsters because they talk about a boss, and clearly only mobsters have bosses. Luckily, the Hardys hit the mobsters with a surprise attack and escape with the pilot. Nancy notices her rope smells funny. It later breaks. She tries following Kurt when someone knocks her out. The Hardys join up with Nancy's group. Coach thinks the mobster stuff is just hunters, playing a practical joke on strangers in the woods. Coach claims his radio is broken, so Frank returns to the crash site to use the plane's radio. He and Nancy run into more mobsters with guns that are easily defeated. Nancy and Frank realize the crash was a setup. The pilot stole $1 million from the mob. His plan was to fake his own death with a plane crash, then escape with Coach. Coach is following the pilot's orders because of his massive gambling debts. Nancy and Frank find the suitcase with the money and hide it. That's the last we hear about the $1 million. The end of the book says the FBI probably recovered the money, which is so vague it makes me think our heroes took the money themselves afterwards. How else do Nancy and the Hardys afford to go on so many trips? The pilot and Coach pull out guns. As we've seen twice already, guns are no defense against the Hardy Boys' surprise tackle. Our heroes stop the culprits, although there's a tense moment when Johnny talks Coach out of shooting him. Joe gets the jump on a mobster and uses his walkie-talkie to call an emergency helicopter. The helicopter has a maximum occupancy of 8, and this is why we had 2 random people tagging along for the entire book. It's so our three heroes and the two culprits could be left behind. They decide to raft down a dangerous river using their tents as a makeshift raft. That is a terrible idea. The culprits get into a fight and knock over the raft. Nancy and Frank save themselves by hiding under the raft. Frank flirts with Nancy, even though this is so not the time for that. And yes, he flirts by complimenting her eyes. They rescue Joe and continue rafting, only to get caught by 6 mobsters. They're rescued by George and 3 others, who came back for them in the helicopter. I'm not sure why taking 2 trips in the helicopter wasn't an option earlier. Everyone makes it back to town. The 2 culprits reappear and attack Joe when he's coming out of the shower. Gross. Fortunately, Coach has a change of heart and stops the other culprit. Nancy realizes the weird smell on the ropes is Melissa's nail polish. Melissa confesses she's the one who tried to kill Johnny. She wanted revenge on him because he's a bad boyfriend who ignores her too much. She also tried to kill Nancy to stop her from solving the mystery. Nancy decides Melissa is troubled and she doesn't press any charges. So Melissa gets a free pass on multiple counts of attempted murder. Yeah, her friends promised to help her, but she tried to kill Nancy! Come on! The end. Post-book follow-up. This book is more like a Nancy Drew George Fane super mystery, guest starring the Hardy Boys. The Hardys do not get equal screen time with Nancy. In fact, they don't show up until 20% of the way through the book. As usual in this series, there were a lot of action scenes where our heroes almost die. I didn't like the action in this book because I found it repetitive. There were multiple action scenes where somebody almost falls off a cliff. Literal cliffhangers. Multiple times the resolution was attack the mobsters suddenly and the surprise appearance of a person we didn't know was there. The mobster angle dominated the book so completely, I kind of forgot that the high schoolers were having drama. It's hard to care that much about a quarterback's self-esteem issues when there are dozens of mobsters with shotguns in the woods trying to kill our main characters. I like George's crush on Johnny, but sadly it didn't go anywhere. Poor George. I thought the ending to the book dragged. I get it, the author wanted all 3 culprit groups to have their own chapter and confrontation scene, but 2 of them took place after the trip was over. It felt like those things should have been resolved sooner. Overall, I didn't think the book was that good. I guess if you like wilderness survival stuff, it's okay, but it's mostly Nancy dodging death scenes in the woods without any mystery or investigation. I give Nancy Drew Hardy Boys Super Mystery number 10, High Survival, a 3 out of 10.